get back on this shit. Hey everybody, I am Sarah. Welcome back to Overkill Reviews. This is, Banger's pandemic-style weekly heavy metal review show. Given that most countries are now in the throes of the second wave and an aggressive wave of COVID, we are still doing this socially distanced style of review. You may have noticed there's a different background in this video, and it's because I am sitting on my couch. Now, why am I sitting on my couch? It is because I got into a very bad bike crash about a month ago, and basically what happened is I went over my handlebars doing about 30 kilometers an hour into a restaurant patio. Got a lot of road rash, and I'm recovering, but my rotator cuff is still kind of messed up, so my back and my shoulders are always mad at me. So here I'm sitting on the couch. Now, let's do the fun stuff. This week, I am reviewing the highly anticipated second studio album by a band that could really only be described as the frontrunners of the American traditional heavy metal movement.
A city turned pirate, like rainbow and iron. Thousands of swords, no one can take them from me. Protected by fire, the armor of iron. Thousands of swords, no one can take them from me.
That's right, it is the second studio album by Eternal Champion. This album is called Ravening Iron. Great name, and it is out now via No Remorse Records. Now, for those who are in the know, you'll already realize that Eternal Champion actually surprise dropped the digital edition of this album on November 6th. It's intended for release on November 20th, but the band decided, given that there was delays at the record pressing plant, that they were going to do the digital release. So the digital album is already out now. The vinyl will come later. We'll all survive. Fire! We're talking about Eternal Champion because I've mentioned them on Banger numerous times, and I would list them as probably my number one favorite modern heavy metal band. And when I say modern, I mean new. I don't mean modern sounding, because Eternal Champion does not sound modern, and that's one of the reasons why I love them. So, a bio. Eternal Champion formed in 2012. They are an epic heavy metal band, and they're from the United States. Sonically, they are an amalgamation of the very mighty US power metal movement. And if you don't know what US power metal is, I strongly suggest that you get into it. They specifically sound like a blend of a couple very important USPM bands. When I say that, I mean Manila Road. They sound like the album Voyager, the Manila Road album Mystification, the mighty Manowar, and like the delightfully strange and deliciously weird Brockus Helm. Eternal Champion is helmed by the writing duo of drummer Arthur Rizek and then the vocalist Jason Tarpey. And the band released their debut demo, The Last King of Picton, in 2013. And then they released the Retaliator single and split, and that was released on vinyl. The other side is a song, or is by Gatekeeper. They are a Canadian epic metal band. And then in 2016, they released their extremely acclaimed debut, The Armor of Ire. This album was not acclaimed when it first came out, but the band has since snowballed in notoriety to seemingly insane levels. Their 2017 EP, Parallel of Death, this cassette, it's insanely, extremely hard to come by, as is their 2019 synth release, Terminus Est. The hype for this new album has reached an absolute fever pitch. I've already seen fans calling it the album of the decade. It was named number 2 in Decibel Magazine's Best Albums of 2020 list. And on that note, you can read my interview with them in the newest issue of Decibel. But we gotta rein all of that in. We are in a year and a decade with so many incredibly strong metal releases. And not only that, but Eternal Champion's debut is now considered a modern metal classic. And it's one that I myself personally named in my number one album of 2010 to 2020. So, does Ravening Iron live up to the hype? Let's find out. So let's talk about what's good on this album. Well, it's the songwriting, the vocals, and the production. Triple threat. The writing combo of Arthur Rizek and Jason Tarpe is really an indomitable one. I think most of you are already familiar with Arthur Rizek because, you know, he is a man of many hats in the metal scene. He's an extremely successful recording engineer. He does mixing, he does mastering, he does producing, as well as an accomplished songwriter who has, done not only the work for Eternal Champion, but for Summerlands as well. And in addition to that, I have to, talk about my bias here, because Arthur also did the mixing and mastering on both of my band's releases, like the EP and the full length, and I consider him a friend. So that's my little I'm biased rant. Now, I want to talk about Tarpe specifically because I think that one of the most distinctive things about Eternal Champion is Tarpe's strange delivery. And when I say this, I mean that he enunciates in this extremely specific, unusual way. And while his words are often almost indecipherable, it's because he's prioritizing elevating the melody of his words. His voice is a bit strange and it's a bit nasally, and it's produced in this very specific, very echoing, bombastic way. And albeit on this album, they actually dialed back the reverb a touch, which I thought was a good shift. It makes singing along to Eternal Champion an exercise in phonetics, or very specifically reading the lyrics to know like exactly what he's saying. It sounds so unusual. His delivery is great. And I believe this in particular is what sets Eternal Champion apart from the other hundreds, if not thousands, of traditional heavy metal bands that are just flooding the market. A lot of bands just don't have great vocalists, or they have great vocalists who just don't do anything out of the ordinary, which then condemns them to mediocrity. Jason works with what he has and sounds unusual doing it, and that is a recipe for memorability, and memorability means your band's good. This album kicks off with two fist-pumping faster tracks, which are called The Face and the Glare and Ravening Iron, which is obviously the title track. And this album instantly lets you know that we should be expecting a similar format and feel to the debut. But where this album differs is that it is moodier, it has more solos, and it has more epic doom integrated. And because of those things, it also has more variation in tempo as well as less filler. Because the debut, I'll remind you, was only 34 minutes long and had 2 instrumental tracks. So there was some filler in there, and it was very short. Whereas this album has only 1 instrumental track and clocks in at 37 minutes, which is the perfect length for containing an album to a single LP. Anyone who likes LPs knows it's like 42 minutes is your maximum on an LP for it to sound good. And before people complain about that being too short, think about this. Are albums better when they leave you wanting more, or when you listen to them and think that certain songs are throwaways and end up skipping them? I'm in the all killer, no filler camp myself. Now I want to talk about the best tracks, which I think are all on the B-side. Coward's Keep, that's my jam. It's a particular highlight. It's this pounding epic doom song with a great chorus featuring, numerous vocal layers. Worms of the Earth, which followed that track, is another highlight. It has some really amazing soloing around the 2-minute and 20-second mark that accompanies the driving drums extremely well. And then there's the album closer, The Banners of Arai. This one is my favorite track on the entire album. I love when a band finishes with the strongest track, and when the 4-minute mark kicks in, Jason screams, "Now die!" And then there's these awesome double kick drums, excellent riff, and it's just the perfect way to end a record, which makes me want more from Eternal Champion. All right, I've been ranting about how great it is, but what is bad? Well, in the immortal words of the Trailer Park Boys, the artwork for this album is greasy. I think that the music and the band can just do better than this. And on that note, I actually asked the band myself about the artwork and their intention with it. And it was painted by the infamous artist Ken Kelly, who of course we know from Kiss, we know from Manowar, we know from Rainbow Rising, which is like one of the most infamous album covers of all time. And that artwork features the character Narilla, who is controlling the insane god who has taken the form of the dragon behind her. And Narilla is a recurring theme in Jason Tarpey's work, and she is featured at length in the new book that he wrote, which is called The Godblade. And that book was actually released in conjunction with the album. You can grab it via our friends at DMR Books, who we interviewed in the episode of Cassette Cult that I did on Manila Road. But yeah, this character's name is Narilla. I totally understand that like she is like part of the Eternal Champion ethos and universe, but that being said, a lot of fans have read this album cover as sexist, and while I personally don't think that it's sexist, I still think that they could have done better with this cover. Because they made an album that rivals their debut, and may indeed surpass it in quality, but let's give it some time before we make that proclamation, because we need to give albums some time to settle, see how they are for replayability, all that other kind of stuff. And because it also introduces new factors into Eternal Champion's already expansive sound, for all those reasons, Eternal Champion's second album, Ravening Iron, is getting 4.5 skulls out of 5 here on Overkill Reviews. Shoutouts! I have 3 releases that are all in my top 10 albums of 2020 list that I want to talk to you about. The first album is the newest release by the wonderful British band Wytch Hazel. This record is called Pentecost. It's very Christian. It sounds like if you put Hallis and Ashbury in a blender. Has just impeccable melodies, and this might be their best album yet. Next up is the absolutely magnificent debut by Megaton Sword. It's called Blood Hails Steel, Steel Hails Fire, and it's out now via Dying Victims Productions. These guys have an absolutely infectious attitude, and sonically, I would say they're quite similar to Eternal Champion, although they're more punk, whereas Eternal Champion's more epic. And they have a different vibe, but this record might actually be my favorite of the 2 albums, but it's hard to say because I love them both. But yeah, Megaton Sword. They don't have nearly as much hype as Eternal Champion, but they really deserve it. Now, for the third and final record, the absolutely stunning new album by Molassess is out now. This band features 4 former musicians from the magnificent band The Devil's Blood, including their vocalist Farida Lamucci. And this record is progressive, it's dark, it's psychedelic, it's wonderful, and it's out now via Season of Mist. You can also grab that on Bandcamp. There's Bandcamp links for everything. Go buy some records. Don't bully people on the internet for having different opinions about album covers than you. And make sure that as 2020 comes to a close, that you check out all the records that have come out this year, because this has been a fucking amazing year for heavy metal, even though the rest of the year has been a complete dumpster fire. All right, bye!